offense to look good in Denver?
Maybe not. Certainly not look great. This is not a Patrick Mahomes go crazy type of game. This is actually, I think, a very similar game plan to the one I encouraged against Jacksonville, which, by the way, the offense did end up scoring a lot of points, and it would have worked, but Patrick made a huge mistake. Say it again?
For both teams.
Yeah, I would have gotten there, but thanks, KW. Quick throws and no mistakes. Yeah. And I think 21 points wins and covers. And I know the Chiefs don't care about the cover. This guy, coming off another 1 and 2 week, cares about the cover. Because I don't think Denver's going to crack 17 against this defense. And so, 17
That's
would,
fair.
Given how, because it's not just Andy Reid off a bye, it's also Steve Spagnuolo. And I think that it is, we had the conversation yesterday, what does a Chiefs loss, if they lose, what does it mean? Who's there more pressure on? And while a loss would be regular season-wise devastating, I don't think any of us would come on here Monday and be like, Chiefs aren't going to make the playoffs if they lose.
No, they still have a high percentage.
You checked the athletic playoff predictor? Good. I think even if they win, but Patrick Mahomes gets a high ankle sprain in this game because he gets hit 11 times, all of us would come on and say they certainly can, maybe likely will. I think that Josh Simmons' first game back in a month, Jawan Taylor off an injury, the best pass rush potentially in NFL history. I do not think this is going to be a high-flying offensive game. I think it's going to be quick passes, ball control, cautious, and trust that Bo Nix is not going to put up enough points to win. That's my honest analysis of this. As much as I'd love Patrick to drop 40 on him, I don't think that's realistic in this game.
I tend to agree. The one thing is with Reid, he's so good after a bye, 22-3, I think the best record ever, that you wonder, could he dial some things up that really expose Denver? But I would expect it to be a hard-fought game, relatively low scoring. And if they get pressure, for Denver, your only path is to get pressure on Patrick. We saw what the Bills did. Here's Mahomes' graphic stats against pressure this year and where he ranks. So, I know you could, that completion percentage is low.
Yeah.
And
30
yards per pass, everything. So if they can consistently get pressure, which, look, Josh Simmons, I don't know if it's 100%.
I think he's going to play.
I would expect him to play. But yeah, he might be rusty.
Yeah.
It's been like 40 days or something since he's played. So that's what makes this game really intriguing to me is if they get a rush on him consistently, then I think it could be up in the air for them.
Let's engage in a comprehensive and detailed analysis of the upcoming NFL showdown between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Denver Broncos. This particular matchup serves as a perfect case study for a critical principle in professional football, the expectation of excellence from elite organizations. My foundational argument is unequivocal. The Kansas City Chiefs are in a position where they are morally, strategically, and logically obligated to win this football game. Before we proceed, I must offer a crucial disclaimer. This is not an ironclad guarantee or a definitive prediction. The inherent volatility of the National Football League means that any team can triumph on any given Sunday. Upsets are woven into the very fabric of the sport. However, from a purely analytical perspective, when one dispassionately assesses all relevant variables, coaching, roster talent, situational context, and opponent vulnerabilities, the Chiefs are so overwhelmingly positioned for success that a failure to secure a victory would constitute a significant and alarming deviation from the established NFL hierarchy. The primary rationale underpinning this stance is rooted in a fundamental axiom of championship-level football. Truly transcendent, brilliantly coached teams are specifically engineered to identify, target, and ruthlessly exploit the weaknesses of their opponents, particularly when those weaknesses are severe, structural, and impossible to conceal. The Denver Broncos are not merely entering this contest at a slight disadvantage. They are arriving profoundly compromised and operating from a position of critical depletion. They are confronting this divisional battle without multiple cornerstone players on both sides of the line of scrimmage. On the defensive side of the ball, they are missing the unequivocal leader of their entire unit, a player who is not just a statistical contributor, but the emotional and intellectual heartbeat of their scheme. the individual who sets the tone and makes the pre-snap adjustments that define their defensive identity. On the offensive side, the attrition is equally devastating. They will be without a key wide receiver whose skill set provides a specific, necessary dimension to their passing attack. And they are also missing their primary bell cow running back, the workhorse upon whom their ground game is built. These are not simple depth chart adjustments or next man up scenarios. These are catastrophic losses that force a coaching staff to fundamentally tear up their playbook and attempt to construct a new, makeshift identity in a single week of practice. When your franchise is the Kansas City Chiefs, an organization I firmly believe is the single best coached entity in the entire National Football League, a model of sustained excellence and strategic ingenuity, these specific opponent deficiencies should provide more than enough leverage, more than sufficient tactical openings, to engineer a relatively straightforward victory. The chasm in coaching acumen, strategic preparation, and in-game adjustment between Andy Reid and the vast majority of his peers is not a matter of small degrees or incremental inches. It is a vast, yawning canyon. Reid, operating in perfect synergy with his defensive mastermind, coordinator Steve Spagnuolo, possesses a preternatural ability to pinpoint a single crack in an opponent's armor. A missing starter, a backup's limitation, a schematic tendency, and exploit it with relentless, surgical precision until that minor flaw becomes a game-deciding rupture. The entire Chiefs dynasty has been built upon this foundational principle. They require only the smallest of openings, one mismatch, one absent star player, one predictable tendency, to systematically deconstruct an opposing game plan from the inside out. We need not look far for a recent tangible example of this very principle in action, albeit from the opposite perspective. Earlier in the current season, the Chiefs themselves found themselves on the unfavorable end of this dynamic. During a stretch where they were missing key offensive weapons like the dynamic wide receiver Rashee Rice and the electric Xavier Worthy, while also navigating significant instability along their offensive line, they looked uncharacteristically vulnerable and beatable. Opposing teams successfully targeted these absences, focusing their defensive schemes on the remaining weapons and pressuring a patched-up offensive front. This is the natural, unforgiving ecosystem of the modern NFL. When a great team is operating at less than full strength, it provides a tangible, exploitable advantage to the opposition, a lifeline that competent opponents are expected to seize. For the better part of a decade, the Chiefs have almost always been the team applying this kind of pressure. They have been the hunters, the opportunists, the squad that turns a slight edge into an insurmountable lead. To see them fail to do so against a wounded rival would be a stark reversal of their core identity. The underlying logic here is straightforward and almost economic in its simplicity. If an NFL franchise is committing tens of millions of dollars in guaranteed capital to certain players, their presence on the field is implicitly understood to be a non-negotiable, critical component of the team's competitive viability and success. If their absence was inconsequential, general managers would simply not make those monumental financial investments. The roster would be built on replaceable, interchangeable parts. A player like Patrick Surtain II for the Denver Broncos is not merely a good or Pro Bowl caliber cornerback. He is a bona fide, scheme-altering weapon who can single-handedly erase an entire side of the field, thereby freeing up defensive resources to be deployed elsewhere. His absence, therefore, is not a minor inconvenience. It is a catastrophic strategic blow that fundamentally reshapes how the Chiefs' offensive brain trust, Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, will approach their entire game plan. Similarly, the concurrent loss of a dynamic running back and a key receiving threat strips the Broncos' offense of its strategic layers, its play-action efficacy, and its overall unpredictability, rendering it more one-dimensional and, consequently, easier to defend. It is crucial, however, to apply the appropriate context to this analysis. If the Chiefs were facing a demonstrably inferior opponent, such as the Jacksonville Jaguars or the Carolina Panthers, and were missing a couple of their own key pieces, my expectation for a victory would remain, but the analytical framework would be different. In that scenario, the overall talent gap between the two organizations, even when accounting for significant injuries, would likely be so vast that it would overwhelm any single variable. However, this is not that scenario. This is a bitter, hard-fought divisional game against a Denver Broncos team that, while not operating on the same celestial plane as Kansas City, has demonstrated tangible resilience, a steadily improving culture, and is led by a shrewd veteran head coach in Sean Payton, who possesses his own Super Bowl pedigree. In a matchup between two teams that know each other with intimate, familial familiarity, having faced each other twice a year for years, where the inherent competitive gap is naturally narrower, the absence of multiple star players becomes the decisive tipping point variable. It represents the critical little bit of an advantage that a brilliantly coached and talent-laden team like the Kansas City Chiefs must be able to recognize, amplify, and ultimately convert into a decisive victory. This brings me to the most nuanced and revealing aspect of my pregame analysis. While the final score and the simple binary of win or loss will dominate the headlines, the true, lasting insight from this contest will be derived from how the game unfolds, the flow, the performance metrics, and the qualitative feel of the contest. Let's break down the potential scenarios and their broader implications. Scenario 1. A commanding and convincing Chiefs victory. This is the expected, logically sound outcome. If Kansas City controls the tempo from the opening kickoff, dominates the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball, wins the critical turnover battle, and their offense operates with its characteristic, terrifying efficiency, it will simply serve to reaffirm the established NFL hierarchy. It would mean the Chiefs did precisely what a great team is supposed to do. They identified a weakened opponent, applied maximum pressure at the points of breakdown, and efficiently took care of their business without unnecessary drama. This is the baseline expectation for a team of their caliber. Scenario 2. An ugly, grinding, low-scoring Chiefs win. If the final score is an unimpressive 17-13 or 20-16, and the Chiefs' offense looks stagnant, out of sync, and consistently stymied for large portions of the game, this outcome should be viewed as a genuine cause for concern within the organization. The prevailing narrative from many national analysts, which has been echoed for weeks, is that the Broncos' offense, led by the developing Bo Nix, is fundamentally limited and lacks the firepower to consistently challenge a defense as sophisticated and talented as Kansas City's. If that same, supposedly limited offense is able to make this a gritty defensive slog, a one-possession dogfight that is decided in the final minutes, it raises serious and legitimate questions. Has Sean Payton discovered a specific schematic key or a series of defensive looks that effectively neutralizes Steve Spagnuolo's pressure packages? Is the Chiefs' own offense, which has shown flashes of inconsistency this season, beyond the brilliance of Patrick Mahomes' heroics, still not operating at its championship-level peak? An ugly, narrow win in this specific context would feel less like a triumph and more like a narrowly avoided disaster, a warning sign that all is not well in Kansas City. Scenario 3. A shocking Broncos upset victory. This, without a doubt, would be the most alarming and resonant outcome for the Kansas City Chiefs and their championship aspirations. It would transcend being a simple, any-given Sunday divisional upset. It would function as a glaring five-alarm fire signal that there might be profound systemic issues at play. If a Broncos team missing several of its most important, highest-paid players can not only compete, but actually defeat the Chiefs on their home field, it would force a dramatic and immediate reevaluation of the AFC West power structure. It would lead to uncomfortable questions. Is the Chiefs' aura of invincibility at Arrowhead Stadium beginning to erode? Has Sean Payton, through his deep, intimate knowledge of this division and his own considerable tactical skill, truly decoded the specific strategic levers to pull that cause Kansas City significant and sustained problems? A loss under these circumstances would be profoundly concerning because it directly challenges the core of their dominance and raises an existential question for their season. If you cannot definitively beat your primary divisional rival when they are at their most vulnerable, how can you realistically expect to defeat them, or other top-tier AFC contenders, when they are at full strength later in the season, with playoff seeding and Super Bowl berths on the line? This analytical framework is not exclusive to this single matchup. It is a lens through which we can evaluate all heavyweight clashes across the league. Consider another marquee game this weekend, such as the confrontation between the Detroit Lions and the Philadelphia Eagles. If one of those contending teams were missing a star of the caliber of Amon-Ra St. Brown or Saquon Barkley, that glaring absence should, in theory, provide the necessary, decisive edge for the other, healthier contender to secure a victory. This is the inherent burden and expectation that comes with being an elite team. You are not only expected to win the games you are supposed to win, but you are also required to professionally and mercilessly capitalize on the misfortunes of your rivals. In conclusion, while I am deliberately avoiding a concrete, definitive prediction, the preponderance of analytical evidence, from coaching to roster depth to situational context, overwhelmingly and unequivocally supports the Kansas City Chiefs. They are the better coached, more talented, and more experienced team. They are facing a key divisional rival that is significantly and visibly weakened by injuries to critical personnel. They are enjoying the substantial benefit of playing at home in one of the most intimidating venues in all of sports. They are quarterbacked by the best player on the planet. Every logical indicator, every strategic arrow, points decisively in their direction. Therefore, this game is less about the binary question of if they should win, and almost entirely about the qualitative nature of how they win. A dominant, wire-to-wire performance would powerfully reinforce their status as the AFC's team to beat. A struggle, a sloppy performance, or an outright loss, however, would rip open a Pandora's box of legitimate and pressing concerns about their ability to maintain their dynasty, their focus, and their execution against a division foe that appears to be patiently and methodically closing the competitive gap. This is not just another regular season game. It is a critical litmus test for the Chiefs' current championship medal and their claim to the throne.